This video is about Saint Ignatius of Loyola, another Spanish meditator from the 1500s. He's famous for starting or founding the organization known as the Jesuits. And he's an interesting guy because he was a soldier before he became spiritual. He was wounded quite severely, I think, and then he had to recover, and in his recovery he had visions of the Virgin Mary and Jesus, and he started to become quite spiritual. And in fact, on a retreat very soon after his conversion, he developed what are now known as the spiritual exercises. But before I get into the story of Saint Ignatius of Loyola's spiritual exercises, I want to tell you my own story about an experience with a Jesuit priest. John Page was an advisor of mine, and I think we should all be, we all need to be very thankful of our spiritual guides over our lives, starting with our parents and family, including those people who give us a hard time and those people who are kind advisors. John Page was an interesting individual. He was a mixture of, on the one hand, kindness, and on the other hand, he had a mind like a steel trap. He'd been trained as a Jesuit, and as I read the spiritual exercises, Saint Ignatius of Loyola, I realized how John Page was formed as an individual. Every meeting that I had with him when I was in university and had to see him as an advisor on quite a regular basis, it was an examination. It was a process of discernment. It was not just, why do you think this? It was, what were the things that affected you? Why are you thinking this way? Would it be possible for you to think another way? His questions all the time challenged me into thinking more deeply about myself and why I was doing things and why things were happening in the world. And he really helped me to understand the whole point of cause and effect relationships and how they affect everything that we do, especially in the environment, because he was a professor of environmental studies. So back to St. Ignatius of Loyola. So as I mentioned, he had a spiritual vision. He became very, very spiritual, and he converted and became a monk. And he started this organization known as the Jesuits. Every Jesuit in their training in the first couple of years has to do the spiritual exercises that were designed by St. Ignatius in the 1500s in Spain. He's another one of the Spanish meditators. There was Teresa of Avila, we've talked about her. John of the Cross, we've talked about him. And the third one is St. Ignatius of Loyola. His spiritual exercises were meant for individuals who wanted to go on a retreat. And what's little known is the fact that he actually taught these spiritual exercises to anyone who was interested. They didn't have to be Catholic, they didn't have to be Jesuits, they didn't have to be monks. And in fact, he designed two sort of approaches to it. One was for the retreatants, the people who went on this month-long retreat, and each week had a different theme, which we'll get into in a minute. Or he had a longer version for people who were normal lay people working at jobs who wanted to work on evenings and weekends on their spiritual development. So the key thing about the spiritual exercises is that they were done under the guidance of a spiritual director. It's sort of similar to the Buddhist and others and yoga concepts of having a guru or lama, a spiritual teacher who can guide you along your spiritual path. So the spiritual director helped these individuals who were working through the spiritual exercises. So he brought the spiritual exercises, as I mentioned, were designed so that they would have these four components to it. The first was the recognition of what he called sin, what we would call negative emotions, negative actions, negative thoughts, and how to deal with those. And if you get past the terminology, that's used in in Christianity versus Buddhism, and other sort of compassion-based religions, you'll find that the process is the same. What we're aiming at, first of all, is to try to understand why we are not as virtuous as we would like to be, and what are the issues that we're dealing with, and how do they start? And we know they start with negative thoughts, which create negative emotions, negative feelings, and from that they go into negative actions. The second compartment of the four compartments was about the life of Jesus. The third component was about the passion of Jesus. And the fourth was about the resurrection of Jesus. So what he was doing in the second, third, and fourth parts was looking at Jesus as a model for us. As Jesus said, you are to become perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. The process of going through these four components is to try to move from negative thoughts, emotions, and actions through to positive thoughts, emotions, and actions. So we're not trying to deny that we have fear or grief or lust or anger or any of those negative things. Well, we're recognizing them, we're meditating on them, and we're trying to move to a more positive approach. It's very, very similar to the process of mindfulness that is used in Buddhism and today in other religions. The key is a process that St. Ignatius of Loyola used, which was, first of all, every day you had a different prayer. So there were each of the four components, each day of the week, you had a different prayer. And that prayer was very specific to that part of the spiritual exercises. You were to read that prayer over and over until you became familiar with it, to question it. You were to think about it, to contemplate it. And then you were to meditate on it and have a discursive meditation with Jesus on that prayer. What does it mean to you? And most importantly to St. Ignatius of Loyola was, what does it mean in your life? How do you translate from that prayer to what you do in your daily life? And that's absolutely key to what we're trying to do in meditation, whether it be mindfulness or insight meditation or calm abiding meditation, or whether it's yogic meditation or Buddhist meditation or Christian meditation. We're trying to move from the mental understanding that we have an issue or that we need to improve or that that's not the right way to do it, to actually acting that way in your daily life. And what happens as we make that transition from book learning to daily life activity is that we forget. And so the constant repetition of meditation on a daily basis, the readings, the spiritual readings, the contemplation, and then the action, as each new activity arises with all its different challenges that may make us forget, we're less likely to forget if we have established that regular positive habit. And that's really what St. Ignatius of Loyola was trying to do. And if you've ever met anyone who's been a Jesuit priest, as my advisor John Page was, they are rock solid. They have a mind like a steel trap, but yet they're kind and gentle, and it's the iron fist in the velvet glove type of approach to life. They don't let anything by, and this was the other thing that Loyola was very key on, and that was the whole process of learning discernment. To be able to discern in life as activities arise, things happen, and interactions with people, to be able to discern how we should act. That's the key. So St. Ignatius wanted his followers, or the individuals that were using the series of spiritual exercises, to understand the nature of humility and how important that is in our lives. To be humble. to let go of the ego is what you would say in Buddhism or other compassion-based religions. So we want to let go of that ego. We want to be humble. We want to come as Jesus did, as a servant to others. So Jesus wanted to help people as a servant, but he didn't allow himself to be taken over by their materialism, by the way that they approach life. He still stood there as a rock-solid, diamond-like in Buddhist terms, or having equanimity, all of these things. So St. Ignatius of Loyola was again suggesting that we needed to be rock-solid in our own beliefs, in our own thinking. And that's really, really key in this whole exercise. The second goal of St. Ignatius, as he said it, was self-awareness. That if you can be self-aware to the point where you're no longer selfish, then you can understand how to love people. Love in the sense of having compassion, and not pity, but compassion, and helping those individuals out of love, working from the heart. Loyola was very key on the whole issue of not being narcissistic and being selfless. It's very, very difficult to be selfless in the face of everything that's going on in the world. So, be well, be happy, meditate, and we'll see you in the next video.